The president gets a lot of attention, but we need to think of the executive in a little bit broader context because the president is just one person and he cannot possibly do all the things that the office requires by himself. So we need to think of the entire presidency. So let's look at the various parts of the president's team. Starting with the vice president, the person whose role is the very least defined by the Constitution. We tend to ignore vice presidents, and the role of the vice president, as long as the president is doing his job, is really dependent on the president. The vice president's role has sometimes been so minimal that vice presidents have just gone back home. That is what happened a lot during the Adams presidency. Thomas Jefferson was John Adams' vice president. They were from opposing political parties, and Jefferson spent a lot of Adams' term back at Monticello. In recent decades, the vice presidents have taken on more of a role. Now, sometimes it is a ceremonial role that the vice president will go to funerals and weddings of foreign dignitaries, foreign leaders, when the president is too busy to go, or the vice president may serve in ceremonial functions when the president is not available. Their most important function, of course, is if the president dies or is incapacitated. That is one thing that the Constitution does lay out. The vice president is the first in line of succession should the president die or become incapacitated, and that has happened. Well, the president has died 8 times. I actually don't know how many times the president has become incapacitated because sometimes those have happened for very short periods and have been kept from the public. For example, if the president was ill, the vice president may be tasked with running the day-to-day operations until the president recovers, and it may not be known until afterwards that had happened so as not to concern people. Vice presidents have also had, when presidents have given them space to, have often had their own sort of issues that they wanted to champion. So using their position to bring some attention to an issue, to promote something, or using their skills, presidents may put the vice president on various commissions or committees if they have particular skills that can be useful. One example of this, and a very unusual vice president, was Dick Cheney, George W. Bush's vice president. The reason he was so unusual is that Dick Cheney made it very clear that he did not want to be president. Often one of the goals of the vice presidency is to groom the person to be the party's candidate once the president has served the maximum number of terms. So it's getting somebody out there, getting people used to them, just like Joe Biden was Obama's vice president. And the idea then is he becomes the party's champion when the current president can no longer run for re-election. But Dick Cheney made it very clear he did not want to be president. That meant he was in some ways not a rival for attention with the president. And what he brought to the table then was a great deal of expertise and experience that George W. Bush could take advantage of. He also was then not a challenger to anybody else in the Republican Party who wanted to run after Bush. So in selecting a vice presidential running mate, candidates weigh several considerations, and this is a choice that the presidential candidate gets to decide. Generally, these things, you're trying to use the vice president to appeal to people that you don't already appeal to. So generally, if the presidential candidate is from the South, the vice president will be from the North or the West. So geographic diversity. You might also get some age diversity in there. So George W. Bush was older or younger, you get an older vice president. Biden is older, you get a younger vice president. Gender, we got that with the Biden-Harris. Race or ethnicity. So bringing different kinds of representation in to try to appeal to a wider base of people. You also may try to find people who have strengths that address places where you are not considered so strong, so that you're hoping people will vote as a team. Also in the president's team are the cabinet. This started with George Washington, who called on the advice. The original cabinet was just 4 members, that these were the heads of departments and the attorney general. These were a group of experts that he wanted to talk to and consult with in making decisions. So it started out as sort of an informal advisory group, and it has become formalized. Each president may also designate give cabinet rank to other advisors that they want to come to cabinet meetings, even if those are not the 15 that have become sort of formalized. But a president can talk to anybody, have anybody as an advisor, and if they can designate people who are going to be on the cabinet just for their presidency, even if they're not a permanent cabinet level position. The cabinets have also been a place for presidents to reflect diversity in their administrations. This is something Bill Clinton was particularly mindful of. But ever since the 70s, in the wake of the civil rights movement, when more attention, people just began to pay more attention to that kind of demographic representation, the cabinet is one level where another place where you can get that kind of representation reflected. The executive office of the president, or the EOP, helps the president carry out the day-to-day responsibilities. There are many components to this, to the EOP. The 4 biggest are the White House office, WHO, the National Security Council, the Office of Management and Budget, and the Council of Economic Advisors. And I should say these sorts of groups, they do have some overlap. So the cabinet is one group, the EOP is another group, but there are cabinet members that also appear in some parts of the EOP, so they're not mutually exclusive groups. Let's look at these 4 big components. The White House office is located in the West Wing of the White House, and so in common parlance, that is how they're often referred to, as the West Wing. These are the staff members that work most directly with the president. They include the president's chief of staff, so the manager of the WHO, the White House office, his press secretary, that's the official spokesman to the media, and the White House counsel, that is the lawyer for the White House. Now, presidents may also have a personal lawyer, which would be separate. That would not be for the White House office, but for the president as an individual. But and that would be outside the White House office. There's a much larger staff that supports all of these people. This would include people writing press releases and speech writers, and the president has several secretaries, not the secretary like the department secretaries, but clerical staff, people who keep his appointments and answer the telephones, who are also very influential. Who decides who gets an appointment meeting on your calendar? It's a very important person. So the WHO runs the day-to-day, the president's office. They are people that are supporting the work that the president is doing right there in the White House. The National Security Council advises the president on national security and foreign policy issues and assists in the implementation of these decisions. Now, the NSC is different than the Department of Defense, but there may be some overlap. But this is giving the president sort of an advisory council on national security matters that is independent of the Department of Defense, so is more loyal to the president than to the whole Defense Department, which, because the bureaucracies have become so large, they have their own sort of internal interests. And so you end up with multiple bodies that are, dealing with similar questions. So the National Security Council advises the president, whereas the Department of Defense implements actually runs the armed services. The National Security Council may assist in the implementation, but is separate from the armed services, so isn't representing the needs of the services. The president officially chairs the NSC. Other regular members include the Vice President, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury. Again, these are cabinet-level secretaries and heads of departments. They have a voice in this council, but they're not the only voices in this council. You also have the National Security Advisor. That is an expert that the president appoints that is not affiliated with a department. So to get multiplicity of views. And again, not just the defense secretary, but also the Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury. So national security is not just having to do with the military, but also balancing the needs of the economy, the needs of internal security, as well as external foreign relations. So lots of different voices, all relevant to the security question. The Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, is there to keep an eye and give advice and crunch the numbers. So they actually work up the annual budget proposal, the details of that. The president will outline priorities, but the president isn't there doing the arithmetic and crunching the numbers. They have a whole staff of accountants and economists responsible for that. That budget proposal is submitted to Congress in January. The director of the OMB is appointed by the president, but there are also about 600 career civil servants in the Office of Management and Budget. These are people that are nonpartisan. That is, they have to set aside their political leanings when they come to work. They are supposed to be just using their expertise and to be as objective as they possibly can. Their job is to make sure that the president is using good, accurate, unslanted, unbiased numbers. So if there's a new policy that initiative that the president wants to pursue, the Office of Management and Budget is going to weigh in on how much would that cost to implement, and how much would that cost to run, so that president and Congress can make responsible decisions. The OMB is involved in a lot of things because anything that has to do with money, they are the impartial department to come in and say, okay, but this is what it's going to cost you, so that you have to face the numbers before you agree to something. Then there is the Council of Economic Advisors. This is a council of experts that help advise the president on the economy and help formulate economic policy. They are so not just crunching numbers, but looking at projections of, how will different policies affect, and what is the health of the economy? What are the tracking the economic indicators, predicting if we spend money on this, how is that going to affect the economy overall? So that broader economic questions, proposing solutions to specific economic problems, and they help prepare an annual economic report that is due to Congress in February. So how's the economy doing, and proposals. So keeping the president with the economic advice to help formulate economic policy